Hello, Jesse.
Morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah, pretty well.
Okay. Um, I'll be fully here in a moment. I'm just going to adjust this background noise
All right.
on my end. How are you?
Oh, pretty good. Pretty good.
That's good. Oops.
So let's see. Oh, yeah, I noticed that you've been busy this week with a couple things, uh, like the Expect conference.
Yeah, that doesn't look. That was surprisingly interesting. I mean, I guess if you look at it, it's not. Um, I just didn't. It was it was someone basically invited me to go to the conference, so I didn't know anything about it. But that was interesting. Um, and I've been. It probably was a little bit overkill, but I've been doing a lot with GitHub, trying to manage. Um, just sort of put a lot of stuff there and have a sense of clarity, like about the projects. And I don't know. I don't actually expect people to use it, but it actually is almost it may just be entirely administrative
Right.
for organizing stuff, but I feel good about that. And I saw that you added, I think, a repo for this Saturday morning NeuroSim or something.
Yeah.
That's cool. I didn't even look at that, but I saw the email notification. Is that what did you want to do with that? Or we can talk. I don't know. I don't know if this is pre-meeting talk or post-meeting. Like,
Kind of transitioning into the meeting. So
okay, yeah,
I'll
we
go
can.
over it
We
a
can.
little bit more in a bit. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
So, yeah. I guess we can start now, and then when people come in, we can, you know.
I think Anson will be here, but yeah, we'll see.
Okay. Maybe we should start with the administrative stuff first, then. So let's see. So I've been I've been thinking about it a little bit more and try to like put in maybe put some things in that we might want to see in the repo. And I think using it for administrative purposes is, of course, I think a prime use. So let me see if I
Mhm.
can. All right. So I'm here at the. This is Oral Group. Okay. So we've got pins. Thank you for pinning some of the directories here, because this is a nice feature that they've recently added. So we've got metabrain models, DBVs, or DBV, contextual geometric structures, and epistemological directories. And I think that's this is in terms of like projects. Um, so I think that's good. Then I added this Saturday morning NeuroSim. So this is probably just for this group, this meeting group. I'm not really sure how to divide things up because we have this Saturday morning NeuroSim. Then we have further down, we have the, I guess we don't. But we do in one of the teams, we have representational brains and phenotypes. So but that's probably okay because I think this is this is more of the level of like different groups of like organizational groups. They might be somewhat transparent to the person who's doing research in the group, but they but this is the way we should set it up, just so we know who's doing kind of what focus. So I think like this. So if we go back to the repositories, I think the Saturday morning NeuroSim would be like just stuff related to this meeting. If there's stuff that we don't really have a place for anywhere else, it could go in here. And then metabrain models would be stuff that goes into the metabrain. Well, sort of the idea of it. Like, so if we have two models that were doing a hybrid, building a hybrid model or doing something else, then it would go in here. The metabrain model repository on this on the legacy repo. It's actually so there's this group of people, the Brainweb, and they have a list of groups. I think I talked about it a while back in one of the meetings. And I have this as a featured project in there, but this is the link that I have it pointed towards. So it has like these keywords are related to this. So people, land here from Brainweb. And I don't know how many people have seen it coming from Brainweb, but this is the place it points them to. It could be that we could change the link to this and then have like this legacy repo here, which is where a lot of the development happens. And then this thing I think I added into methods and models MD, which is like where you say in our legacy repository, we have resources. Let me change that now so it doesn't bug me. For the following model types, and then these are the model types, and they're all basically things that are listed in the legacy repository. So this is, let me commit this. So that's what we have here, and then people can like use this as kind of a front end, and then you can use this as sort of more of a back end where you're doing development, and you're and then back here we have metabrain models. Metabrain models. We go back up to the top. We have teams, and then this. I don't think we have a team for metabrain models, but we do it. Maybe no. Okay. So we can make a team for metabrain models, I suppose. But I don't know if it's essential because I don't know if anyone's actually doing just that. So there are probably in other groups.
Yeah, I was away from the screen when you said were you talking about the teams in the oral thing? In oral.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like teams are kind of mostly just for show, but it does it does help it's really good for it streamlines the permission making process. I don't know if you've played with that with the groups at all, but just to kind of I'll show you. I'll run through that just a second here. There we go. But yeah, I like all of that stuff, and I'll say a little bit more. Let me. That's right. I'm not quite here yet. Yes, share this here. Here. So for the teams, they don't. It's not really I think it's a cool way to kind of show who is part of it. Members of the brains is going to be the major group, and that's I think that's great and fine, and it's sort of a way to. I think it's a way to kind of just show that we have a lot of people who and a lot of history of stuff in this particular vein of inquiry. There's probably other groups that could be made from stuff over the past few years. But what's like I don't really know what would be good to do here. But like I think I finished updating. I think I've actually finally finished updating and inviting everybody to all this stuff. But just for the sake of it, like you can connect repos. And forgive me if I missed this or that you saw this, but like basically you can connect repos to it, and anybody that has, we need to make a repo for NeuroMesh, by the way. But like you can connect, if you connect a repo to it, like these are the connected repos that are actually in Oral, like the Oral group.
Yeah.
Anybody who's added as a member of this team, either here or on the main page, like if you're an owner or anything, you can add them here. If you add someone here, they automatically have access to all the repos underneath it. So at its administrative level for like managing GitHub stuff, because not everybody has access. If you're in, like in old things, you'd always have to give people access to whatever specific repo at any time. It will streamline that. But if you add somebody who's already in the group, now you don't have to. I don't have to send anybody a request to join and wait for them to accept it in email. Like once they're on the team, they're there. So that makes like functionally speaking, that's what Teams does, and having a member on the team does, and having a repo linked to the team does. Like that's a way to coordinate all of that management, and you could say what kind of access people have and stuff like that. So anyway, that's part of it. But also, I think showing, like there's a legacy of people here. You could, if you want, you could make a team for Saturday morning NeuroSim, but I think that's kind of redundant from. That's not really. I see them more as project oriented. I don't know if we really need to have the. We might not need this team. I was just thinking like, oh, what are the things that we did? But if it's just me there, I don't need to display that. That's not necessarily important. But yeah, and I didn't. Is there anything else that you had meant? Like, were there any questions that you had when you were talking about that stuff? Because I was trying to set something up here, and then I think it finally happened. So I kind of missed it. Sorry.
Yeah, why don't you go up to the top of this screen? Okay, so so it's now at the pinned repositories, and we have those. Maybe we'll pin, a couple more as they, maybe even the Saturday morning NeuroSim might be good to pin.
Oh yeah.
But there's nothing in it right now, but that's okay. I guess we can pin it anyways.
We can actually. Yeah, It would. As you probably know or saw, like here in the task board. Actually, let me make this like this. I basically put some reminders here, and like things like this, like some of these can just go right into Saturday morning NeuroSim, or essentially, because Saturday morning NeuroSim is basically it's this production that we're doing, but it's also it's the lab meeting, the weekly stand-up lab meeting basically. So there's certain things that just fit into that category,
right?
Issue-wise, or like what we're doing issues here. And just to sort things out, and even like, I don't know, I kind of have shifted one of these boards, the task board, into a little bit differently than we used to do it. Like there's a bunch of labels and stuff here, but at the same time, I kind of am. I smoothed it toward the structure that was sort of not at all like a traditional sprint or scrum setup, no, but a sense of like weekly sort of old business, new business kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like these don't. I'm not. I probably am gonna remove these from these like pull requests. They don't need to. I don't know if they really need to be here or not, but I kept them here for the sake that they were created and they. I was playing with how to attach them to specifically to issues here. Um, but it kind of can be a way of showing, okay, what's happened this weekend, or what are we trying to do between this week and next week. I think that can help. But it's also not, I don't think that's necessarily the correct lens to look at everything, because obviously sometimes it'll just be like, hey, we all worked on the same project last week and new. And that's just fine. But for the sake of keeping a sense of all the different things that we have to do, like I think it's a movement in that direction. So that's sort of where that comes from.
Yeah, I like that. I like the way that's structured. We'll revisit that in a minute. That board. So
yeah, I don't know what I don't know what you wanted to do next. Because there's plenty of things to look at.
Yeah. Oh, hi, Anson. How are you?
Morning.
Good morning. Pretty good.
Good. Anything new going on this week in your life, or?
Still working on the paper on artificial life for my AI course. I think I'm going to start collecting research material to go through, and then make a loose outline. Actually, if you have any pointers for like a primer on like artificial life, artificial consciousness, or what was the last one I told her?
I know you mentioned multi
systems. I'd be down.
Yeah, there's some resources I can share with you. I can send it to your email, I guess.
Or email is fine, and so would Slack. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'll look at it. There are a number of resources. In fact, we'll probably talk about one topic today that you might find interesting. So, yeah, I'm glad to hear you're making progress on that. It'd be interesting to see the outcome.
Yeah. Originally the assignment was to do like a paper on like frontier research in AI, but I asked her if I could orient it this way. She's really fine with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like and that fits like in the purview of the lab, like that fits a lot with like epistemological directories and a lot of my own like mapping stuff, as you know. So there's a lot of overlap there, and so there are some resources at all that exist in terms of some of the maps, but also actually this directly ties into something that I wanted to mention and put on the project board or the task board, but I met a group of people. I don't know if I've met. I don't know what the correct terms virtually were. I knew some people who also are in a Facebook group about autodidacts and learning and teaching and stuff. And one of them is very interested in like I think they're like an intern at Google Brain and things like that about meta learning and stuff. And they have some hubs and interest in a similar thing that what you mentioned. So I think there's some opportunities to cross seed or take from each other's. I don't know, collaborate necessarily, but like there's a lot of there's resources that are oral. There's some resources that are found online, and there's also a bunch of conferences. Like, and there's the Artificial Life conference that Bradly's been a part of for a while now, and there's a lot here. So I think it'll be an interesting project. I'm excited to see that get off the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited to do research, and I chose my topic partly because of the lab. I think getting a solid foundation there would help with moving, with contributing more to different projects.
Yeah, and there's a lot that will come from that. So it's good.
Yeah,
In fact, I want my software development course is a group project where we might be working on deep learning. Depending on whether it gets approved, we might be working on like machine learning um, kind of chair. I think it was like booster seat identification within cars project, which also sounds interesting, but not as directly related.
Yeah. Well, we've talked a lot about deep learning. I mean, there's always the applications domain, so it should be, I think we can. It fits into the group. Let's just put it that way, and we can help out if you need any references or resources. Definitely in Slack, I think you can find with deep learning. I think like Rishab especially knows a lot about, that, and then moving into reinforcement learning, but.
Yeah, it's actually really, I recommend it because one of the nice things about our Slack is that people are very helpful in like DMs, and this is a distributed lab, and not everybody's always in the same place at the same time, and that's the nature of it. But at the same time, like Rashab's very helpful, and past members, like you can reach out to Stefan, you can reach out to Z and Ankit, and they've applied a lot of deep learning to things in the lab and otherwise too, and they're still around, they still care. Everybody's busy, at different times, but there's a lot of I think we have a good. I appreciate the lab culture, even for sort of people who aren't immediately present. Want to contribute as much as they can usually. So, so that's good. And I think just to say, I think everybody's exhausted from this week, from other stuff. So I'm tired. I didn't quite much to the one until last night, but I really all been paying attention to stuff. So
Yeah, that's good. Thank you for the update. So next, I guess so why don't we go back to the Teams thing, because I was going to point some things out here. I actually wanted to take a look at the board, and if that's okay, we'll just, I'll share my screen here. So yeah, these are the groups, and I agree, like the groups will probably just like maybe, hopefully we can foster some maybe discussion in these. So this is like Slack, this is just public. Like I mentioned, this kind of reminds me of Gitter that they used to have for.
yeah,
They used to integrate into GitHub, and I don't know if it still works. I don't know if they're still around, but it would be a public discussion area rather than the private Slack. So it might not be every discussion you want to have about it, but like public things that we could put in like a feed or something.
yeah. I find it. I guess like I've been saying, sort of like ResearchGate and how they do some stuff, but it's public, but it's like pretty buried, and like nobody's gonna really go there unless they want to. So you can have updates, and I think it's kind of nice to kind of highlight. Like I kind of done that a little bit in NeuroMatch, but just like here's sort of a semi-public, almost like a Facebook wall for your project. So yeah, and there's some benefit to that, but I don't expect everybody to,
Yeah.
people don't have to post there all the time. So
Yeah. We might also have a NeuroMatch repo.
we need to make a NeuroMatch repo. I kind of left it out there to see if anybody else wanted to do it, but I'll probably make it this week if nobody else does.
because we do have like all the outreach stuff related to NeuroMatch. So like the study group and all that. I mean, it's not like I don't know how much we actually have from that, but it would be nice to take some of the stuff from the legacy repo and push it out to the main this one because we have in legacy repo we have a NeuroMatch repo that is
Yeah, I mean, there
somewhere
was
here,
some stuff in that.
So we have the project, the feedback loops project. Then there actually is the epistemological directory in there, but that's something that that I think that's linked from the front, and then this slow NMA pod, which is like may or may not it didn't really happen here, but like it can be a curation quality thing. So and there are a lot of things we can do with that. It's not it's if it's hidden back here, it's like there's a lot of stuff going on with developing things, but taking kind of the best out of this and putting it up. So that's for that too. So I wanted to go back to this board, the project boards. So this is micro, and so this is. Tell me which one. What are these two boards? What's the difference?
Yeah. Okay. Test is sort of like all the details. Like task is like basically the management center. Project board is specifically for projects. Like there aren't fine grained details in there mostly. And I wanted projects to be a place where, because every time people come to the lab and they'll ask me, hey, I'm interested in the lab. I'm thinking about joining. What are you guys doing? What can I work on? Like in some ways, project is about that question because it's been difficult at times to say, oh, here's our active project, but there's also like, I'll share my screen actually if you're done.
Oh no, I just wanted to. I'll go back to this.
Or click on the projects board.
All right.
The top one here. Like you can see, this is not obviously representative of everything that we've ever done, and like there's a bunch of stuff, in the past, but like there's ongoing stuff from the blog posts, and I wanted to create some list of like the potential things because there's a lot of projects that are sort of, I think it's important to at least see or talk about in the sense people know that, hey, you can take the ball and run with it here. Like there's an opportunity for you to have leadership on a project and say you want to be sort of the person driving this. And obviously our lab distributed, and it's not like I don't, outside of the things that I've specifically created for myself, like which are my project and my sort of research people, whatever, like it's not like there has to be one specific leader for a project. And I don't mean to imply that at all, but definitely there's a sense of like, hey, there are people and resources and interest and an opportunity in this area. Let's call that sort of a project. And like the potential section is kind of just there as, hey, if someone wants to take this off the ground, you'll probably find support and opportunity to do stuff. And like obviously what I put there right now is sort of just are things that I've created. Maybe even one or two of those should be more of a presentation and a task and not a project, to be honest, looking at it right now.
Yeah.
But like open and help wanted things are basically things with some things that have started and we're looking for, like everything in there is basically looking for people to help with. I don't know if Anson's term paper is maybe kind of on the fringe of that because it's his paper, but that could turn into something very applicable for the lab. Of okay, well, this is Anson's term paper, and here's like an adjacent presentation, and that could be turned into a publication or a blog article or something. So I mean, just seeing that these are senses of like clustered groups of activity at a bigger level that can go someplace. And there's like, I put on the right side stuff that's going to happen, like all the neuro stuff and neuromatch stuff. Like those are all there, and like that's kind of just for history's sake, and they can I can move those to archive, and they're not sort of I was trying to break out different stages of okay, project lifespan, like inception and conception and whatever, and then you have the birth, and people are okay, we're helping this out, and then we're in progress, and then we're everything to review before we kind of finish it, or like the before we release it or close it or finish it out, and then done and then archive. So that's just the idea there, and it's not complete. But I feel like having those things are important because I think it's useful to see that, and obviously as a lab manager or industry perspective, it's nice to have that. But also just people who want to propose an idea, or people who are looking like, oh, like I have so many interests related to the lab. What can I get started on? Like I might make a label that says good first project as opposed to good first issue, which I'm kind of using it for. But that's where that idea comes from. And again, it's not something that I feel people. I don't expect this board to be updated as much as the other board, but it's sort of just an overview of some specific projects, and it's not complete yet. But I like the idea of kind of saying, hey, here's because and part of this is adapted from looking at like other labs and other things that I'm doing for as I go to graduate school and seeing how like people advertise, well, there's an opportunity for leadership if you want to do a project in this area, and some labs are not. Some labs are very much, hey, this is what we're doing, get on board, and we're going to go in this direction, and that's fine. But I think the benefit of our lab, yeah, well, I'm going to have to tell you, Google Assistant, for not understanding me, so don't worry. What I mean by that is the benefit of our lab is, well, we have if you get to a place and you want to start a research project, you can do that out of nowhere. Well, not out of nowhere, but like from scratch, and you can find support here, like I was saying. And I think that's actually that's a great thing. It's a difficult thing to do. It's challenging. Like that's what. That makes it, you're starting to get higher into the level of like ownership and leadership for your research and stuff like that. But I think it's important to people to know that that's available, and that in a way the lab is very conducive to that. And I think that's an exciting thing. And I really like that because I've been in a lot of situations where that hasn't been the case, and so it. Just commenting on that part of it too, but I don't think Project Board will be. We may not even look at it every week, but I made it mostly for that purpose and for myself to kind of keep track on things, and like people, it helps me to say like, hey, Anson, how's your project going? What do you need with that? Like I can check up with people. Reach out to them during the week or during office hours and just check up on stuff. So it's sort of a tool for that as well.
Yeah. So these, when you don't have, like, it looks like some of them are issueized, meaning that they're formal issues, and then some are not. Like this one is not an issue yet.
Yeah, and like that's like there's some rhyme and reason to that, and some of it isn't. Like the NeuroMatch one, I just kind of looked at there as a placeholder. Everything that's not an issue is kind of a placeholder. When it's formalized into an issue, I think that's like, okay, that's stepping up a bit more. The trajectories of cognition one should definitely be an issue. I just haven't. I think I made that before I wasn't sure if I was going to make a how do you say? I wasn't sure if I was going to make that a Yeah, like if you go in there, I have the Cognition Futures repo,
Yeah.
so it's actually part of that. I don't think I made it at the time, so yeah, like that's a repo. And there are other things like that too, like the NeuroMatch feedback project. That's like an actual project that actually exists.
Right.
But there's no NeuroMatch repo, so I was like, yeah, we'll make this first, and then I'll turn it into an issue in that repo. So
Yeah.
like that. I wasn't sure, and we can talk about this, but like I wasn't sure scientific, not Charlotte's thing, the other one. I didn't.
Oh yeah.
I feel like I missed that one about. So that's sort of like I know that's been movement or talk about that, but I don't really know what that is. Obviously, the NeuroMatch Academy blog is something existing that I've been working on. And if anybody wants to contribute to that, that's still open. That's kind of moving towards in progress and maybe the review stage at this point. And the COG survey thing, similar to predictive cognition, that's actually a thing too. So, yeah, like this work could maybe be a little more pristine and reflecting reality. But I don't, I'm not going to micromanage the board too much. But there's a lot of I think it helps to kind of at least give a space for those things. And like to look at all the way to the left side again, Neuro November, that's I think Indian-based conference.
Yeah.
And there's still a lot of room to apply to that. And I might, it's like I think more like a student-run, lower-level NeuroMatch kind of thing. But I think I might want to support that. I'll probably submit something to it. The lab can do that as well. It wouldn't. I don't think it would be. I think there's a little more like, let's say, undergraduate level, like it's sort of hackathon incorporation, but and some teams and some activities that are involved in it. But it's sort of promising. If anybody wants to go in and work on that, let me know. I'll be thinking about that in the next week or so. And what else is there? Yeah, multi-agent learning based off of Tenenbaum's written paper. That's come a lot of different times, and I would really like to do something with that. I don't have any time to do anything with that for probably a month, but I wanted to put that there. If anybody's particularly interested in multi-agent learning or I don't know, that aspect of computational cognitive science, looking at like their paper won like best student paper or something, best paper at a recent like good event, and like I'd like to really go over that paper and apply it, kind of merge that paper with some of the agent-based modeling stuff that we've been looking at in the lab previously. So that's sort of open project for to come take along. Present a review paper on nature models and network neuroscience. That was like one of the top of the list for people's recommendations for data science and neuroscience. So I think at least presenting that paper in the lab would be a good thing to do, and something that could, like, I'll go through this later and kind of more categorize these issues and stuff, but I think that'd be a fun thing for people to do. And then AI law and code and or policing, predictive policing. I have a history in those areas, and talking to a colleague, a friend of mine, there's interest in doing another bit of work on that. That probably won't happen for me for a few, probably at the end of the year or next year, like basically after graduate school applications finish for me. But if anybody's interested in that category, like I would love it if someone's like, hey, I'm really interested in law and technology or this application of AI in the justice system, in my country, which is different than my previous collaborations have had an international flavor because they've been outside of the United States. And as people probably know, the United States has its own legal system that isn't the same necessarily as other people's legal systems, and in common law versus other law, and so on and so forth. So that's definitely an open project, and I encourage people to, like, when it's an issue or whatever, write a comment there or mention it in Slack. So it's kind of just giving a place to highlight these things and encourage anybody who and Anson's project. Anson's term paper is here, but there also could be a tab for Anson's previous project, or even the associated one from this. These are still in the legacy repo too. The one that was like the coloration and the dots, like it was sort of like the transition piece between the photo taxis or the chromo taxis or whatever, and what Anson's project were about stuff like that. I don't know what to call it, but that's absolutely a potential project that if someone wants to spearhead, hey, it's right there. Like that's like it's ready to be actualized within the lab what we're doing here. So I write that down actually.
Yeah, I think
those things are there. Sure.
That's great. Yeah, I like the categories. And this is mainly for your administrative stuff. So then I take it the other board, or this is the task board. Okay, so this is the other one.
Yeah, this is more like the day to day, week to week. Like this is where most things will be, and this is much more. I don't know, fine grained and messy, but at the same time, just to break this one down for other people too. Like from left to right, you have two assigned or weekly, and I'm kind of working on the heading titles. 2 assigned, in progress, whole, done. And I'm kind of looking at that, and that's sort of like a weekly basis for me. Like not necessarily everything that has to be done this week, but I kind of see that as a week. Like this is to me in my mind, this is like intentionally what I'll be looking at each week as I go as a lab manager, as I go through stuff and say, okay, well, what do we need to do? What are we actually doing? What are we waiting on? What do we finish? And the other two categories are essentially tasks or projects. I don't really care that much. But the potential, awaiting the project leader, and the done and the archive stuff. Those are like not necessarily active right now. And like you could say, should the refining the software collection for DB stuff or the broadgen brain transfer, like is that kind of a to do? Yeah, it is. Like those really should be moved. But it's also like, it is what it is. Like it probably will be me or Bradly that's moving those things over, unless some of the other creators return and want to do that. Like I don't realistically expect someone new to the lab to go on and deal with all those things and move them. But that's still like, that's a potential thing that can be done. And I also put what is developmental cognitive neuroscience as a potential presentation or a potential blog post, because I was basically recommended that book, and I would really like to. Well, I recommended a book about it, and even there's a differentiation in the preface and the introductory about what is developmental cognitive neuroscience. And I think that would be a fun presentation to do. It's not particularly urgent. It's not something that needs to be done. It's not time based. But that's sort of something I would like to do in the future. So that's sort of just sitting as a potential idea. But yeah, like going backwards, everything, like things that are done this week. I think everybody has been invited now. So that's actually done. And everything below that is kind of repos. And we had discussions and just stuff that we're working on. I did some of this after last meeting. All that stuff will eventually, I'll move it to the archive and just say, like, hey, here's stuff that actually has been done or worked on this week. And you can kind of see, okay, here's like where there's been a little bit of movement. And I don't expect this column won't necessarily be filled up every week, because stuff will just be within its own issue, and a lot of these are smaller stuff. But like, if it'd be cool, like, hey, if you made a pull request on something, or and you did finish it, and you wanted to talk about it here, it could also just be like a reminder to say, hey, I made this repo, I made this update, and I just wanted to mention it here. I go overboard with the labels and stuff right now, but it's kind of just a way to kind of show within the last week, what has there been, anything we've done. Hold and review are, we can have a whole conversation about the synthetic daisy stuff. I don't know if you want to do that now or later.
We can do it later. Yeah.
What's that?
We can do it later.
Yeah, because I don't quite, like there's a lot of questions about Revisit, the organization. So yeah. And I think I did make a writing repo, and I don't know if that suffices for what you wanted it to be. We could make another repo if that one doesn't work for it, because I feel like that's. I'm trying to figure out what the hell to call it, because it's like, what is it? Writing? Is it blogging? Is that?
Yeah, I guess it's writing, blogging, and that. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, like I wanted to have a place like there's a lot of writing that we do that isn't actually a paper that's still important. So maybe that category works for it or not. And then in progress, Neuromatch blog post. I have created the infrastructure to that. I don't know if anybody's added to it most recently, but that's in the works. They're moving on that front. Expect conference. I'll talk about that later. Maybe Flashes Web Cafe. That seems to be set a date for that. I don't know if you want to say
December 11th at I think 4 or 5 o'clock p.m. UTC. So that's in the morning for North America. That's in the afternoon, evening for Europe, and then late evening for India. And the talk will be on. I gave a talk on observer-dependent models a couple weeks ago in this group, and so I'm going to expand that talk out to maybe an hour, and I'm going to go into the talk was maybe about the one here was 20 to 25 minutes. I'll go into more depth about what that looks like. Some of that will be from the paper that we that got rejected from the Shared Visual Representations workshop, and some of that will be just kind of maybe walking through that a little bit more and then putting it on into the existing talk. So that's going to be something that we'll advertise coming up.
Yeah, and that's something that I think Bradly probably be spearheading a presentation on that, but that's open. I see this. If people are interested in that topic, I'm sure they could help out with the presentation or talking about it. So that's sort of that's a cool thing with their
the Cyber Cafe Scientifique stuff. I still have to work on a proposal for it. I'll just write something up, maybe like a rough draft of something, and then we can put it in Slack and look at it and see if it's something people want to do or what, whatever.
Yeah.
And then the other thing was something else coming up. I can't remember what it was. These you mentioned these like potential projects that were awaiting a project leader. So the way I think about that is we can actually advertise those on social media or in the weekly email to make people aware that there are things that they can do. Because it's like, it's not necessarily apparent. I mean, if you say encounter the lab through the Twitter feed, you don't know, and you can watch the meetings, but you don't necessarily know you can take something and take the initiative on it and so forth. So that's something that I want to make, clear to people that they can get involved.
Yeah, I think that would be huge because a lot of people dip in and out and ask, and they're looking for it. And being able to see it, I mean, even if it's like, yes, an issue on GitHub is one thing, but you can kind of graduate it to like, oh, here's like almost like an abstract or like a miniature project proposal, just so it's like, hey, waiting like a work order ticket waiting to be picked up by somebody kind of thing. So.
Yeah.
I'm glad that I was thinking about that, but I wasn't sure if you'd want to do that. But I think that'd be a great thing to do because people want to do stuff and ask. So
yeah. Anson, did you have anything to add, or before we move on?
Oh.
Okay.
Nope, no particular. I think it makes sense to make it more things more accessible in terms of taking leadership and seeing what's out there and being worked on.
And I know we're taking a long time on this, but just to quickly finish up the board, I can.
Well, you can share your screen, yeah. That's fine. Yeah.
All right, let me share this. Yeah, great. So I put Anson's project on here. Good job, Anson. I'll move you up to the top list because you're doing it. Flash's Web Cafe talk. I just put some, little reminders down there about we're moving forward with that. We have a date set. That's good. That'll stay here. I can go over this at some point. I guess that kind of was, I'll put it there for now.
Yeah.
This is active. I am working on this article. I'm happy about that. If it wasn't for Expect Conference, it probably would have been totally finished by now. But Expect Conference, I was surprised by that, and I got caught up in it, and I'm okay with that. Active stuff. Yeah, this is definitely an administrative task. I will demonstrate. Well, I don't know, whatever. Other later. But for anybody who's this is a reminder for everybody. I accepted the one that was one or two that were specific to me about put your Animats submission opt-in to have it specified on their YouTube channel. Just a reminder, hey, do that. I think you have a limited time to do that. If you want to do that. It's recommended. So that way, I think it'll be online anyway in the broader chunks of stuff, or maybe it won't be, I don't know. But if you want yours on YouTube, please find your NeuroMaps email. It would look like it was something about opt-in to present your video on YouTube. So
I put a link in the chat about that. So
okay, yeah, great. But yeah, just as a reminder, great that with that done. Mention that I'll get to that next. Neuro November submissions. This is still kind of a what if. I'll keep that there. NeuroMaps repo. We need to set that up. I'll do that soon because it's sort of it's a bit of a log jam for other things right now. Just having a place to put some of our stuff. This still is, I think, still kind of an open question. If anybody wants to go through the legacy repo and what we have for FS1 directories or is interested in that topic, reach out to me or Bradly, and we can kind of say, hey, here's what we need to do. But this specific task is what should be on our front end repo, and or what could we add to it? We have a bunch of links to the old repo, but there's more that could be here and more information that could be here. This sort of layout and this there's a lot of stuff here, and maybe writing up a little bit more to make that more clear, or linking to specific things that are available. There's an opportunity there to refine some things, and it probably should be done. So I kept it in the to-do category. And then this one I kind of already did, but just to kind of, I don't know if we can click on this link here. Yeah, there's this group on Facebook for inspired autodidacts, and people trying to learn stuff on their own. I just wanted to mention, this group and this discussion, how do you do it? This is very germane to our stuff. I think I mentioned this here. Yeah, like Jeremy Nixon is a very cool individual, and he's working on some stuff for mapping the machine intelligence research frontier. This isn't a super exhaustive document, but it's something. And this is particularly what I wanted to mention. Luke Miller mentioned this, and this is all this is public, so I'm not, I'm not being in private on Facebook, I think. But Luke said, because it's a question of how do you break down these fields of study. Oh, sorry, I'm going crazy. How do you research and develop these big fields, like field finding stuff? And Luke's comments are really good. I've been thinking about this for a while. He breaks down the language, key term the concept, question and answers, key questions in the field, narratives, which is like I comment on that down below, metaphors, symbols, visual representations, habits, resources, except you can. If you can nail down those things, you get a different map. Jeremy agrees. Luke, talks about his experiences, and I was like, yeah, I think it's great. And I look at these things myself. I've initially incorporated this to all the stuff that I've done, but in my mind, like, yeah, what are the power structures, like funding, who are the big figures? Like classic example is Minsky and his influence on the perceptron concept and neural networks and symbolic AI. Like there's that big shift. But there's a lot of other examples of things like that in the course of development and many things. So I just wanted to mention that. There are some ties in with. Oops, wrong board. There are some ties in with things. I think I'm still wrong board. Let's see. Anyway, there still ties into things what we're doing here, and I wanted to mention that, and okay. I feel like if people are particularly interested in any of those topics, or epic frontiers, or maybe adjacent to epistemological directory sort of things, I just wanted to kind of highlight that and mention that, and great, we did that magic. Just to mention it, this could even be like, this may more appropriately be just to demonstrate doing this for people. This may more appropriately be actually labeled under transfer the issue to the new repository that Bradly made. Yeah. 31 NeuroSim, great. Yeah. And that's mentioned here. And again, I don't expect people to go in the weeds and do this with issues. I don't care. But yeah, it is what it is.
That looks like something we could pull into the epistemological directories, or at least some sort of profile of that. I don't know how. Yeah, I mean, this is stuff like people are having the similar ideas, and we should capture that in some way.
Yeah, and I'm very new to this group, but there's a lot of I think that's Johan. Yeah, I'm a fan of Dr. Johan John. And a lot of very interesting people trying to learn stuff happen to be in this group. So, a potential way to collaborate on things in the future, or mention or drop some of our project, our project advertisements, and say, hey, we have an open project that's related to this. If everybody wants to come join us, that's definitely an opportunity right there. I'll clean this up. I'm not going to do this on camera now. I'm sure you have other things to talk about. But I'll clean this up later and go from there. So I don't know what else you wanted to talk about today.
I got some things, so we'll move on to those. But thank you for showing the boards, because I'm glad that we all know now at least a little bit about how it's set up.
I'll go over Expect Conference, but I've been talking so much today, and I'm actually writing up a very small blog post about it as a predecessor and movement on the writing that I want to do. We can talk about that next week. I don't have anything easy to show, but it's a great to be discussed later. So
okay, yeah, it sounds good. I noticed that Andy Clark was there, and a couple other people from, I think, Josh Tenenbaum too, right? Or
where's my thing? I'm not sure if Josh was there, but here it is. I had it. Sorry, I'm gonna do this because I had it ready to go and then I didn't. I messed it up. Yeah, and it was. I really was impressed by it. As a conference that Ryan Lemasters from Anson's the Anson West, his university had an interdisciplinary humanities studies group, and mentioned this there. It's like, hey, check this out. I'm going to go. This is it. All things predictive. It's really good. I really like Lisa Feldman Barrett's talk was awesome. Giovanni Pezzulo's great. I kind of miss Sean Gallagher's, but he's a really cool guy in general. Paul Fletcher's talk was great. Nico's good. And Nico was the one who did city. It was really, she was like a city urban planning person, but she actually mentioned affordances directly, and it was really interesting talk, a set of talks looking at predictive processing, and a lot of people were looking at how really relevant to a lot of the work we're doing, because it's how design affects things. And I forget if it was Fletcher, or I think it was Paul Fletcher, who specifically looked at how bottom up influences on prediction, and how bottom up and like anatomical and those kind of things pre-shape information processing and so on. So a lot of great talks to be talked more about next week. So
yeah, and I saw that you put some things in Slack that were related to this, like previews of the talks, and then I guess the talks are on YouTube, so we can look if people are interested. Go into Slack. Okay, there we are, and check it out. There's some previews that Jesse put in, and we have a link to the YouTube channel, so that's something. Oh yeah, I did mention, or the biocybernetic cycle came up, and I put those slides in from the virtuality talk from Neuromatch 2 that the lab gave. So yeah.
Yeah, some interesting throwbacks to early stuff. Like, there's a whole cybernetics branch of things here in the lab, and this is cool. See some direct mentions here like that. Oh, hey, Rasad mentioned something. But yeah, really good stuff here. And again, we'll move on. But thank you for your attention.
Oh yeah, no problem. I wanted to talk about that a little bit. It looked like an interesting development in the Slack channels.
In my mind, it's like you have to close things up by saying thank you for your TED talk or thank you for your attention, and it's like okay.
All right, so the Neuromatch conference talks. If you have not, you should have gotten an email if you submitted an abstract. And I already approved the talk that I submitted on the diatom non-neuronal cognition. I know Jesse got an email. He should have gotten an email about the developmental AI talk. And Krishna should have gotten one about the ANN BNN talk. And then Akshara should have gotten one about the talk that she gave. So all of those, we want to make those public. And I think they're behind on it. I mean, I think they started at Monday and we were on Thursday. So that's going to be, it's going to be a while before they come up. But I put a link to the YouTube channel in the chat. If you look there, I'll share my screen. This is the YouTube page where they're putting the talks. So they're at a calcium-based plasticity model. I think these are from like Monday, maybe Tuesday. So there's a way to go. They're processing them. They'll just take them out of that feed, cut them, and put them up here so we can link to them directly, and you can put them on your websites as you wish, or your CV. You can link to the YouTube video. Also, you can check out all of these videos. This one was good here. Aristotle was a neuroscientist. There's some stuff on mind-body relations, mathematics ability, and then there's stuff on EEG rhythms. So there's a lot of stuff here you can check out. I don't know if they're thinking about curating any of this, but this is definitely something that is probably needs to be curated. We talked a little about curating resources for the lab, so this might be something we could try to find some particularly interesting talks relevant to the lab, and maybe put them in Slack and or maybe this would be something we could put in the neuromatch repository, like or maybe a neuromatch group where we like put up different talks of interest, and it's just a place for people to see things that are related to what we're doing in the lab, and someone else is presenting them. And so this is going to be a good resource. I also wanted to mention that we got the reviews back for the shared visual representations paper from the workshop, and it was rejected. I got the reviews here, so if you want let me go to this folder in Google Drive. I'll put it in the chat. It's basically, it wasn't a very good fit to the conference, and they had some technical issues with it as well. It didn't have like a formal analysis attached and so forth. It was hard for them to follow, of course, because we're trying to do a lot in a very short period of time. Absence of validations. It's hard to decipher. So I mean, they're like, they found it interesting, but it wasn't okay, but not good enough. Which is like, I mean, we can talk about, this is the paper, of course, the extended abstract that was submitted to the Collective Intelligence Conference, and then they didn't accept that, so we refashioned it a bit and submitted it to this workshop, and now they rejected it. So we keep doing this iteratively, changing it. This is Jesse, myself, and Ujwal Singh, who's not here today. But so if you want to be an author on this paper, you can go to that repository. I can put it on the Slack channel, and if you can look it over and maybe suggest changes and become involved in that way. I don't know where we'll submit it next. Maybe we'll submit it to another workshop or something coming up. We'll probably preprint it at some point, but I'm not sure yet where or when.
I think both of the papers for NeuroSim were very good. And it's just they weren't necessarily the right fit for those workshops, which is okay, but that we wrote them and that they're interesting and good stuff. I think, and maybe I'll put this on the project board specifically, but like those are two like continually ongoing things in the lab that people should be excited about. So
yeah, sometimes it takes a while to get something good, something good. It's just, you just have to try a couple different things, and don't lose faith. I've had papers where they've been in review for like a decade. Well, there was one paper that was in review for like 12 years in various forms before it actually got published in a journal. So that's like, that's a long time to wait. But that's what happens sometimes. You have to work through, sometimes people don't like the idea. It's too early. It's not quite what they're expecting, and then you just have to work it out. So never give up on something just because you get a bad review, or it's, you just got to keep it.
Yeah, it's not quite the right fit for the workshop.
Yeah.
Right fit for other workshops, other things.
Yeah. Sure. We got Jesse put a message in the chat from Rashab.
Yeah, Rashab just mentioned stuff.
Oh yeah, the cosine. Yeah, I saw that on Twitter. Cosine abstracts are coming up. There's also SFN as a virtual meeting coming up early next year on connectomes. I saw that too. I got an advertisement email. I think both of these are like you have to pay to get in, but we could submit something there. If Rashab is going, we could submit something there and you could present it. So if you were interested in that, why don't we we put it in the channel. Okay, put it in one of the channels on Slack, so that's good.
Yeah, put it in general, so.
Okay, so good. I mean, that's something we can follow up on maybe. So that's good. Now let me go to this other thing I was going to talk about. So the Cyber Cafe Scientifique thing is, I'll come up with something about that in Slack soon. I have a couple of papers. I don't know how much I'm going to get through them, but I do have this thing I'm going to present maybe next week. I want to preview it this week, a topic called Animats. And so this is Anson asked about A-Life and some of the things he could put in a review. And so this might be very interesting to Anson. So this is a concept of animats. And animats are, I took some notes here. I'll make a presentation on this maybe for next week, but they're animals plus materials. So there are these, like, they come back from like maybe about the 1980s. Actually, they were first conceptualized in this paper by Rodney Brooks called Intelligence Without Representation. And I can't remember what year that was published. I think we covered it in an earlier meeting. It's a classic paper. But suffice it to say, this is something that he kind of conceptualized, and then it developed further into a series of workshops. There's another paper, Knowledge and Growth in an Artificial Animal. This was by Wilson in 1985. And this is where he contemplates these animats. There's these embodied agents that are like animals. They have like a neuroethology. So, there's like this brain, and it interacts with the environment, and it's naturalistic in its interactions. And then you can study sort of the behavior. And so he had something called in this book a subanimat, linking so the example he gave was linking the speeds of two motors to the level of illumination. And that's in an organism, or a fake organism he called Machina speculatrix. So it's like spectrum or speculation, and it's a machine. So I think this was also mentioned in Margaret Bowden's book, Mind is Machine. So Jesse, you can maybe look that up sometime. But this reminds me of the stuff we're doing with developmental Bratenberg vehicles. Because we've been talking about like using wheel speeds and motors on the vehicles to like do things with spatial cognition or with motor learning, and then linking it to things like illumination level or something in the environment, something else in the environment. So I thought that was very interesting. I'll put that into a set of slides because I have some thoughts about that connection, but not this week. There's also something called Rana Computatrix, and Rana is the genus name for frogs. So this is a frog-like animat, and Rana Computatrix, it's not a real frog, it's a fake frog. And this is a person called Michael Arbib, and he's actually quite famous in AI research. He's done a lot of stuff with like some biologically inspired stuff, some other stuff. But if you look up Michael Arbib, you'll find some really interesting papers by him. He's done some interesting work. And he has this paper, Levels of Modeling and Mechanisms of Visually Guided Behavior. And in this paper, he talks, this is in, I think, Brain and Behavioral Sciences, the journal. So let me put, So he published this paper in Brain and Behavioral Sciences, and they talk more about animats, this frog-like animat, and it's foraging for food in this environment, and then he contemplates things about that. Now, one of the interesting things about Brain and Behavioral Sciences as a journal is that you get the article, and then they have this very long set of rebuttals or discussions after the article. So if you go to download the article, you'll notice the article is super long. And the reason is because they'll have these people, just all sorts of people responding to the article, and they print it in the issue. So they have responses from different research groups critiquing the approach, saying it's a good idea, saying it's a bad idea. And then the author actually rebuts a lot of these criticisms. So you get this nice conversation about the topic. So that might be useful for Anson in terms of looking at how people are thinking about these issues. Like, it's one thing to read the paper, and then it's another thing to see what the experts are thinking in real time. Like, oh yeah, this sucks. Well, you suck, and you have this conversation. It's a little more civil than that, but you get my point. It's like, and sometimes they think it's a great idea, and so they kind of expound and bring their own work to bear, and it's great. But you should definitely read it. and so that's there are frog-like animats, there's sub-animats. You get there's this rooting in artificial, very good old-fashioned or GoFi artificial intelligence. Um, and then one more thing is that there you might find there's a series of workshops from animals to animats, and so I don't know if your library has them, or you can find this on like Google Library, Google Books, but it's like a conference series, and it's been going on for years and years and years, and they have like conference papers on all sorts of topics in animats. So it's like it's a life. They do these like agent-based simulations where they have agents in an environment and they're exploring things, and it's really interesting work. One of these pieces of work happened about 20 years ago by someone, Thomas DeMarzi. I don't know if he's in science anymore, but he did this really interesting paper on something called the neurally controlled animat. And what it is it's this animat that controls a flight simulator, and it basically is able to fly the plane. And you think that's amazing, but it's really just a control problem. You have this airplane, and you have a couple of parameters that the agent has to solve for or optimize. And so if you have a plane, you have a couple things, your altitude, your attitude, your bearing. Those are the things you have to optimize to get it to fly the plane, right? Like they have autopilot, and that's based on a linear classifier. So I mean, it's not a hard problem. It's just that it's hard. Like it's a hard problem if you're building an AI to do it, to train it. It's a lot harder than just applying like, yeah, there's the Brooks paper from 91. I was a little off on the time frame, but it's 1991, so it was in like modern AI terms, it's ancient history, but yeah, so that's something that they that's a problem that they actually do in brain computer interfaces, is flying a plane or a flight simulator. And so that's something else I think that you might find interesting. So that's an area you might want to look into for A-Life materials and linking them to AI explicitly. And I'll give a talk on this next week. And so let me give you the link to this folder. I don't know if I did this or not. I have the permissions set up, so if you need to get in, and you should be able to get in and share. Oh, I have it up here. So that's where I have that outline, and then I'll do a presentation next week. I wanted to talk about a few more papers before we go. This is the Arbib paper. I have it up. So this is the Behavioral and Brain Sciences paper, Levels of Modeling and of Mechanisms of Visually Guided Behavior. So they talk about something called connectionism or parallel distributed processing. Never heard of that, but no, I know it's a famous thing. They had J.O. McClelland actually in the Learning Cafe yesterday, the one that Neuromatch puts on. So if you missed that, you can go back and look at it. I don't have the link, but it might be.
I'll send it.
Okay, so that should be good. So why don't we look into this a little bit here? So recently, the domination of cognitive science by the serial computational paradigm has been broken by research on connectionism and parallel distributed processing. So this is classic work by Rumelhart and McClelland. And then I think Arbib was involved in this early. He did a historical perspective linking this field to earlier work in brain theory and adaptive networks. So Arbib 1987, and it should be in the references of this paper. The stress, however, has been on models with only two levels: overall behavior and neuron-like elements. So you have this behavioral output and the neurons that produce it, and it's sort of a black box. In this target article, I argue for the utility of schemas as units of computational analysis, intermediate between behavioral neurons. So the schema idea actually goes back in AI quite a ways, where you build this sort of world. Instead of like just throwing data at the network, you have a model of concepts basically, and it tells the AI kind of what's what, how to orient itself in the world. There's a huge literature on schemas in AI, and it's a little old fashioned maybe for like in the modern machine learning. From the modern machine learning perspective, I think if you go to the AAAI conference, though, schemas actually they still have like workshops on this topic. But so while stressing that brain theory is not just connectionism, incorporating data from neuroanatomy and neurophysiology requires considerations that go well beyond the development of cognitive models in the style of the brain. So this is something that he has. I know that Rabib has other papers on where he talks about looking at neuroanatomy and neurophysiology as inspirations for AI. And the talk that Krishna and I gave at Neuromatch on BNNs and ANNs, we kind of briefly talk about that, where we talk about like there are a couple of papers that have come out recently on how to make deep learning more like the brain. And some of the things they suggest in those papers is that you need to have a network that is, diverse. It's heterogeneous. These networks, instead of having like a black box network or a network with a bunch of hidden units, there's a lot of structure in it. Like you have modules for different processing different things, but that they're connected like you see in the brain. And so these are things that people don't talk about enough, I think. And it's something that goes back quite a ways, actually, in AI research. So I think that's good. And then they talk about figure 1 here, which is where you have different levels. You have a functional level, which are animal behaviors and schemas. You have structural levels, which are the brain region. And then you have these layers. So in cortex, you have layers of processing. So you have like what they call a column of cortex, which is like a stack of different levels of the cortical tissue. So the cortical tissue has like, if you know about like neocortex, if you've seen pictures of it, it's folded up in human brains, but it's basically a 6-layered structure where each layer has slightly different properties, but it's just like basically, the same types of cells, and they're kind of connected down this column, and the column, it's not across the brain, it's one column of cells, and they actually process things through these columns, through these layers in different ways. So you might start at the top layer and you might go down to the bottom, and you might specify something in those layers. So as you go down the layers, there's integration of information, or you get more specific information. And so that's something that he's talking about in this paper. And actually, if you've ever heard of the group doing the hierarchical temporal modeling, they do this sort of approach where they use cortical layers to compute things. We haven't so we have a course, DevaWorm ML, that I did at the fall of 2019. And I can share that with Anson too, some of those lectures, because some of those lectures were actually pretty useful in terms of like understanding some of these things that I'm talking about. So this is lamination in the brain. That's an important thing that we don't usually have in machine learning models. We have layers, but we don't have the integration like this. So yeah, and he goes through all this, like the biological aspects of this and how they relate to things that are cognitive, like perceptual and motor schemas. And he actually brings up Fortran in this paper. So it's not like, this is an old, like 1987 paper. So Fortran, Lisp, and Pascal are all pretty dead programs for doing this. But yeah, he mentions them in here. So, but that's not important. What's important is that you can build these schemas. So yeah, this is a coordinated control program for reaching and grasping. So you have, this is your representation here. You have, I don't know if you can see, okay. You have this, go down a little bit. You have all sorts of different things in this model. You have visual input. You have visual and tactile input. You have activation of reaching, hand reaching. This is what they call a cognitive model. So you have these different parameters that are more, like functional in an animal. So like visual location, size recognition, finger adjustment, hand rotation. This is grasping. So this is like the hand, a model of the hand. This is a model of reaching, which is the arm. And, people have done this with like computational models for robots too. Where they try to emulate the cerebellum, and they use like a different set of differential equations to monitor these ballistic movements and adjustments. But this is it's a black box model, so it's you can put things in these black boxes. But this is like concepts. These aren't like equations or things like that. They're just concepts, and so you can put whatever you want in there. And so this is the way that they're visualizing this problem in 1987. And so you have, this may or may not be really, actually 1981. This may or may not be super old-fashioned. I mean, it's probably useful today, at least to reflect on it, if not to actually build off of it, because they actually came up with a lot of interesting ideas, like the coordinated control program, which is what this is. And there's a lot of stuff that, so this is an example of someone reaching for a ball. And this is a classic problem in AI. It's reaching and grasping. And they're actually able to do this, model this. And then this is where they talk about Rana computatrix, which is the fake frog. So you have this, this is initiated from the study of the frog visual system. We're classifying retinal ganglion cells into 4 classes. It projects to a retinotopic map. So this is where it's projecting visual information to a map of space. And then you have this. This allows you to map that then to some motor system that can move in different directions and refine its movements. So that's basically how this works. They do some things with these Animat toads, where they look at stimuli offset at different directions in its visual field, and then they can use that model to predict what the behavior of the animal will be. This is a nice picture of frogs here. 3 sequences showing a toad with protective lesions snapping at moving objects. So there's a classic experiment by Sperry in neuroscience where they've taken like a frog, or they've taken a lizard, I can't remember which, and they took the eye in the juvenile, and they took it out, and they rotated the eye like at 45 or 90 degrees. And then they let the visual pathways develop as a consequence of moving the eye. So they've basically shifted the visual frame. And they find that in those frogs, or in those, I guess I don't know what animal it is, they rotated the visual reference frame so much that the animal will, it sticks its tongue out to get prey, to capture like a insect prey. And it will actually systematically shoot its tongue out 45 to 90 degrees from the target. So they're actually if you were to shift the animal 45 to 90 degrees in a certain direction, they would actually always capture the prey. But it's just because you've rotated that visual reference frame that they're consistently making an error. And so that's some of the things that you can do and learn from in terms of like animals and their behavior and how they conceive of the world. So this is an interesting paper. It's really long. I don't want to go through much more of it right now. But just suffice it to say, like I said, there's a set of comments at the end here. I think so you see they have these comments. So this one is Keith Gunderson, levels of psychological reality are Beeb's schemas, and matters may be metaphysical. And so this is a comment on something related to the approach. It's very, they're going to bring in a lot of stuff from CogSci and from AI research. The biotope of Rana computatrix. And then this is where they talk about the animal and do some more contemplating. So it's really informative to go through some of these responses. This is an ethogram of random computatrix. So this is an example of the frog, and then it's, an array of targets, target prey, and all this. So this is the way an animat is set up. So it's kind of like an A-wife model where you're giving it an environment and you have the agent and it's doing something in the environment. And then this is an ethogram of, so this is like a diagram of the behaviors. So moving object versus a non-moving object. You have prey acquisition, predator, and mate pairing. So you have all these different behaviors. And this is actually something they use in animal behavior. It's called an ethogram, where they consider the different states and the outcomes. So let's see. And then there's this other paper I wanted to talk about before we go. And this is also artificial life, which is why I wanted to talk about it today. This is Soda Race, Adventures in Artificial Life. So this, I don't think this is live anymore. I couldn't really find it on the web, but this is something I liked to play with a long time ago. It was actually pretty popular, maybe about 15 or 20 years ago. It's called the Soda Race Project. And so it's like basically these point animations where you would take like these points and then these line segments between the points, and you could build these creatures that had you could take the points. They were like point models of like an arm or a leg, and you take the points, which would be like joints, and then the lines between them would be like links, and you could determine the stiffness of the links and of the points. And so that the physics of that construction would provide you with this organism, and then it would behave in this environment. You could let it explore, hop around, do all these weird things, and then people who built the best phenotypes, they would win this race. And so Soda Race was based on the Soda Constructor software, which was a mass spring diagram, basically, come to life. If you know what those are, that's something from engineering, but basically it's masses. The dots are springs, and the links are springs, and the dots are these masses. And so this is a picture of it right here. So this is the Soda Race. These are the little animals or creatures that they're building, these spring mass animations. So this is one here with like 3 masses and some springs between them. This is another one. It's like a figure 8. And then this is another one, kind of like a dinosaur or something. And then this one here is a classic design where you have like your springs, you have like a quadruped that's exploring the surface. So, these are all springs and these are the points. And then this thing is, structurally stable, but it's also walking around, and sometimes it, can't make it all the way across can't make it through a gate because it collapses. And it's actually was pretty fun to play with, pretty addictive. So this paper talks about the Soda Race. September of 2000, they redeveloped this applet so that you could save it. So this actually was, they started, they initialized the interface, the Soda Constructor interface, in March of 2000. So they started at about 1990 programming in BASIC, and then they updated it to Java, so they were able to make it a little bit easier to run. And then in 2002, they launched the Soda Race project. It took the form of a race over a flat terrain with simple wheeled-like creations named amoebas by the community. The artificial intelligence technique of genetic algorithms were used to optimize the parameters of the wheel to cover the racetrack in a competitive time. So this is actually something that is the reason it's artificial life, is because they're actually using genetic algorithms in some of this, and not so much in the design, but in the optimizing the parameters. And so yeah, this is an interesting paper, and I would recommend this to Anson as well, just as a historical overview, but also as something that people were doing maybe 20 years ago that might be something that could be rediscovered. And so, yeah, Soda Race was, like I said, I can't find anything on the web about this. The Soda Race, it's like Soda Constructors disappeared. It's been vaporized. But see, you have these waveforms on the side, and you have these physical parameters that you can adjust so that the behavior is, more or less viable. And then you can use genetic algorithms to modify or to optimize some of these parameters so that it actually moves and can win a race. And this is, of course, a real-world structure of one of these soda racers. So they don't look so much like animals, but the idea is to get an idea maybe of what animals could look like. That's maybe one of the values of this approach. Animal phenotypes in particular. And so there are a bunch of references here. So that's something that you might want to look into as well. Any thoughts on that? Or
It looks really cool. I'm looking up Soda right now. It's interesting. I think I'll definitely look into it.
Yeah, it should. Like I said, I don't think there's much on online anymore. But if you go to like the Internet Archive, you might be able to find some things on it too.
I found Wikipedia linked an applet that's similar still around, and I think it reminds me of the game they used to play as a kid online.
Yeah. Okay. Jesse, do you have anything to add, or?
No, I'm gonna have to be stepping out soon to go to another event. But I liked all this here, and I'll be following up on it. Also, wanted to say the papers from last week were also very good. I've been looking through those as well. So, just kudos for the good papers being put in these sessions.
Yeah, if anyone has any papers they'd like to review, you can send them to me, and I'll bring them up during the meeting. Otherwise, we can talk. We can talk more about these papers too. We can follow up on them. So, but yeah, that's a good idea. And then we can also. I had mentioned last in the other group that I'm working, DevaWorm, about maybe making like an annotated bibliography of some of these papers, where you take the citation and you sort of summarize it in maybe like a paragraph or two, and then have that in like So. Those are all things, we want to capture some of this stuff and our impressions of it. So,
yeah, I think that'd be good. Also, like that could be kind of an ongoing, like that's something that I find really useful to do, even in the sense of like turning into something mildly public facing. Like it doesn't have to be a blog article per se, but it could be like maybe a specified repo somewhere or just something, because having like it's not really the glorious thing to do, but at the same time you really get into it when you do that, and making it digestible and consolidating, like, okay, here on this week we reviewed these 2-3 papers, and here's a paragraph summary about them, and then being in charge of publishing that somewhere like that. I think that's a really good practice. Not practice. It's a good kind of practice to do. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to that as well, and that kind of dovetails a lot of what I've been saying about as just to kind of reiterate this. I know it's kind of obvious, but I've really been shifting to, if I go to an event, I want to write something about it, and even just as sort of training and practice for that, for the goals that I have that aren't necessarily purely, that are, well, I'll say that are a lot of different applications for that. But I think getting used to writing that and this has always been a place to present stuff as it is. So I mean, I appreciate that, and then taking a step further with, don't just. I likened it to. I was explaining this to my friend this week, and I likened it to like the twirly birds, like those maple seedlings, things that fall in the air and really fall, slow. They fall very, very, very slowly. For those of us in the Northeast, we know what we're talking about. I don't know what they call them, people who don't have those. Well, they're like very small, they're like sort of like leaves that fall very slowly. And I'm like, yeah, that's what it feels like when I take notes or go to something. And it's like, that's the information. And it's like, it stays there and it just slowly drifts away. But like, there are ways to sort of catch it. And then I use a really extended analogy of like, you bake it, like you make it into something, and then you give it out again. Like you put it public facing, you process it. You don't just like digest it if you're baking it, but like you do something with it, you transform it, and you make it public facing. And that process is very yes, explained to other people, feminine and stuff, but just generally general actual active recall and active construction of information. Like that's great for learning, but also like it helps you step into the role of a communicator and a presenter and that sort of thing. So I had a few conversations about that this week, as you can tell. But I think it's, at least for myself, I'm always trying to get better at that. And not everybody has to do that, but I encourage anybody who's interested in that kind of thing to mention it, and we can find ways to incorporate whatever you want to focus on for that. So, yeah, definitely for this stuff too. But that's probably it for me. Otherwise, I gotta be on my way.
Okay. Yeah, we'll talk about note taking more next week. But well, everyone have a good week. Thank you for attending. And if you're watching us on YouTube, be in touch on Slack or some other way.
Yes. Thank you to the people who virtually attend. And like Rashad wasn't here, but he dropped some stuff on us. We mentioned that, so we appreciate that, and hope everybody's doing well, and all your endeavors and things that you're dealing with are going well too.
Thank you. Talk to you next week.
All right, bye.
All right, bye.